Having looked at how to draw a number of individual elements in the last two sections, what we'll do in this video is start combining those individual elements into a scene, and why you might want to do that within your visual notes. What I mean when I say scene is simply the combination of two or more visual elements. If we have just one icon on the page, it could mean a whole lot of things. All we know about this guy here is that he is walking, or at least that he appears to be. With just one additional element, we've added a whole lot of context to this situation. We now know that this person is outside, and that it's daytime, and that it's probably hot based on the brightness of that sun, and that as a result, our guy here is probably tired and maybe thirsty because of that. And you could go on, building up a picture of what might be behind those two elements. So as you build up a scene, what you are doing is making a world, one that your audience can picture themselves in and maybe even immerse themselves in. That particular wording of make a world is also an allusion to Ed Emberley's wonderful book with the same title, because it demonstrates the ability to use simple drawings to capture not just a moment in time, but also the story surrounding that moment. That's why it's so powerful. Another reason why scenes are worth adding to your visual notes has to do with that spectrum from abstract imagery to realistic imagery that we talked about earlier. Remember that we get more realistic as we move from icons to scenes, because with scenes we begin to capture a particular situation, and that's when this idea of specificity as an anchor comes into play. Once a scene starts to emerge on the page, even one as simple as a stick figure and a sun, you and/or your audience naturally begins to ask themselves the who, what, where, why, and when of that situation. Where exactly is that person walking to? Why is he out walking in the sun? Is he even a he, or maybe instead a she? Without the specificity of at least a few visual elements, those questions don't really come up, and you miss out on the opportunity to explore that situation. Now that you've seen the what and why of scenes, let's look at a few examples so that you get a clearer picture of their power. I'd like to describe one example for each of the three application categories that we'll be exploring in part 2 of this course. Those applications are to learn, to solve problems, and to share ideas. For each, I will give an abstract example that could apply in a lot of situations, but then give a more specific example to bring it home. As a learner, what you can do with the scene is bring together multiple elements of the subject you're learning about into one cohesive picture. As a specific example, let's say you're learning a new language. To develop your language skills, you could sketch out a scene and label each element in that scene with the word in the language that you're learning. And then write a brief story about that scene in that new language. Language learning is so much easier when you have a story attached to the new words that you're learning. And scenes give you a memorable anchor to that story. Let's turn next to problem solving. When you are working on a particular problem, what you can do is sketch out a scene that represents the problem in action so that you can explore potential solutions. To get a bit more specific, imagine that you are working as a coach or a consultant. Your job is to provide an outside perspective on someone's situation in order to help solve a particular problem. To do that, you can simply listen to your client tell the story surrounding that problem or situation, draw that situation out with simple icons into a scene, and then use that drawn scene as an anchor to the conversation you have with your client as you look for solutions. Finally, let's look at sharing ideas. If your goal is to use visual notes to communicate with others, then a scene will help you to do that communicating via a story that they might see themselves in, or that at least resonates with them on some level. For a more specific example, think of a teacher who wants to help their students undergo a particular transformation. They might use a scene or even a sequence of scenes to demonstrate that transformation. I hope that this particular transformation is resonating with you at this point in time or in the near future. Notice that the idea of story keeps coming up in the examples. That's because it's hard to look at any type of scene without wondering about the story behind it. Use that to your advantage in your visual notes. Use a scene and the corresponding story as a hook into the set of ideas that you are capturing, processing, or sharing. With these examples here, I hope that you now see the power of incorporating scenes into your notes and that you're already starting to think about some context-specific ways of using them in your own work. To get you started down that path of using scenes in a useful way within your visual notes, check out the activities below before heading on to the final video within this imagery module.